Hello, everyone. Welcome to CXO Spice. CXO Spice is a platform for thought leaders to share their point of view on innovation and explain how to make it real. And today's topic is outsmarting inflation. Our special guest today is Paul Saunders, who is the head of product strategy and Chief Evangelist Cloud ERP for SAP S/4HANA. Hi, Paul. Welcome to CXO Spice.
Hello, Helen. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure hosting you here, Paul. Your journey from the CIO, being a CIO and being with Gartner and SAP give you unique advantage leading in today's environment. So please share with us what led you to SAP and what do you really do as a head of product strategy and Chief Evangelist Cloud ERP?
So yeah, the title doesn't fit on a business card if we still carry those. That's the one thing. But if I go back many years ago, I never wanted a career in IT and technology. I wanted to be a rock star. And I failed miserably due to lack of talent. But I've been involved in technology ever since I was about 11. I've been programming computers since I was 11. I understand technology. And technology and music, to me, are very similar. They've kind of got the same structure, and you can be quite creative with them. So after going to university, I tried to be a rock star, failed miserably, and then I was hired by a company doing technology. I was a software programmer, and somebody said to me one day, "Would you like to be involved in an SAP project?" And I was like, "Sure, don't know what it is, but it sounds like fun. What's that?" So I started to work on this large SAP project all those years ago. And I went then from software development, spent a little bit of time working at Yahoo when Yahoo was cool, and then kind of ended up on the IT side of things. And I worked for a really large US company. I'm originally from here in the UK, but I've spent a big portion of my life in the US. And I became CIO. And so then running big ERP solutions, running supply chain solutions, and so on. And most of that time doing manufacturing, aerospace, and defense. So I have this kind of soft spot for production lines and shop floors and things like that. Then decided to change completely and moved here to Scotland, brought my whole family over here to Scotland, and worked in education for a bit as a CTO for a university. Then, as you say, time at Gartner as a VP of research. And while I was at Gartner, I did a lot of work with many technology companies, SAP being one of them. And I really love what SAP stands for. When we say that we want to help the world run better and improve people's lives, it's not a slogan. It's what we really mean. So I'm now here running the product strategy for SAP S/4HANA Cloud, which is our ERP solution. And as an evangelist, talking about ERP, talking about cloud ERP, until somebody tells me to shut up, basically.
Wow, what a pleasure having you here, Paul. That's quite a journey. That journey alone deserves another episode of CXO Spice. Let's focus on outsmarting inflation today, right? Knowing how the rock moves is important before you castle is important. So it's so important to really see the bigger picture and understand the impact of inflation and the macroeconomics. So what have you seen as the top challenges in today's environment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, as somebody who's worked in technology for a long time, we have, I would say, overused the term disruption and digital disruption by a large margin. And now what we're seeing, I think, is a lot of disruption all coming at the same time. And even though we'd like to think about it as supply chain challenges and, big boats getting stuck in canals and, and global conflict and then inflation and geopolitical issues. And, then we've had the great resignation. We've got future of work changes, all of this kind of stuff. They are, to your point, they're all interrelated. I think of some of the things like here in the UK, we may be having, as we're going into the winter, there may be a resurgence of COVID-19. As that happens, there's a threat that our Royal College of Nursing, all of our nurses, will go on strike for the first time in 106 years. And what they're asking for is a 5% raise over inflation, which here in the UK now makes it, that's a 17% raise. So the government's saying, well, they can't go out because we can't afford that. And so then the police are now saying, well, if they have to cover the nurses, then crime will go up. That if crime goes up, and you see all these things, it is that butterfly effect. All of these things are kind of interrelated. So when you look at kind of how do you deal with inflation, you can't just think about one thing. Mm-hmm. Business is complicated. It's the job of companies like SAP to take away a lot of that complexity. But there are, you have to be able to think of it and saying, okay, well, as I move this piece, to your point, it's kind of like the chessboard, you've got to be thinking 5 moves ahead and also start to think about, well, what happens if the person I'm playing against does something that I was not expecting? Yeah. And then how do I react? And the only way you can do that is to have flexibility and agility, not just in your technology, but in your approach, your attitude, your mindset as well. And that's what we've been trying to drive at SAP.
Yeah, that's a great segue to my next question, right? We actually earlier this week just discussed Outsmarting Inflation webcast hosted by you. So we had a much more in-depth discussion. And working capital optimization and supply chain efficiency are top of mind regardless of size of the company or industry of the company. Could you share your key takeaway from the webcast for those who were not able to make to the webcast?
Yeah, so there's a few things that really stood out. One, great panels in both webcasts, really, really good. And it's always good for me as the host of that, not to be the smartest person in the room, because even though I was hosting it, making sure it was a good event, it was a lot of fun. There's some really good conversations that were going back and forth. As I said, my background is I come from technology, and before that, from the arts. I never enjoyed finance, to be honest. I really didn't. It was, I always struggled with it when I was doing my master's degree. I was like, T accounting, how boring can this be? It's killing me. And then one day I was sent off for this 2-week executive training at my former company. This is 20 years ago now, at the Thunderbird International School of Business, which is spectacular, place out in Arizona. And I remember the professor coming on in front of us all and talking about business. And he started kind of stage right. And he said, right then, so you advertise your products and you come up with some designs and some ideas. And then every step he took as he was walking through, the kind of the standard end-to-end processes, he was saying, okay, and now you've got an order. And now you're checking on inventory, and now you're building the product. And finally, he was on the far side over on stage left. And he said, and now you get paid. And he said, and you've got to get from over there to here. That was the first time that finance, 1, made any sense to me, and 2, was interesting. And I've been kind of hooked on it ever since that. And from the webcast, some of the questions that I thought was, this is stuff that everybody who's doing their Finance 101 class knows what to do. But the theory is a lot easier than the practice. And hearing, you all talk about the complexity of business and what it's like being a global organization and all the different things that you have to manage, that to me was really kind of interesting. And then also from an ERP perspective, when you talk about the kind of the 4 things that you can use to manage inflation, accounts payable, accounts receivable, inventory, and cash, that's what ERP was created for. So I wanted to jump up and down in the webcast and say, oh, that's what we do. But, I tried to be professional.
That's interesting, Paul, because I pivoted my career from being a bean counter to a bean grower, right? Started off as accountant, financial analyst, and then I feel like something was missing there. Not until I became a programmer to build and design something similar to S4HANA. As a matter of fact, it was a Hyperion, right? I built 400 plus Hyperion financial planning system, I started tying that everything we learned, right, in theory to the practical outcome. And that's the point I got aha moment. That's what I like to do the rest of my career, right? So I think that's being said, when it comes to the business strategy, cost, speed, and innovation are on top of minds for everybody today, right? And then, but business maturity and drivers for change are also some determining factors that dictate company strategy. So what evolution have you seen, and how should enterprises prioritize their digitalization needs to outsmart inflation?
So I'll tell you what, when I was a CIO in the US, I had, at one point I was CIO for 2 different businesses, and I had 2 bosses who were the presidents of those businesses. And then I had a 3rd boss who was the corporate CIO. So I had 3 bosses, all telling me to do different things. Most of the time, cut my costs. That was kind of it. And one year, I went in for my end of year performance review with one of my bosses, one of the presidents, and he said to me, he said, Paul, he said, I know IT will always give me what I want. And in my mind, immediately, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a good year. I'm getting a bonus. This is going to be great. And then he followed it up with, long after I need it and for way more money than I'm willing to pay. And my heart sank very quickly. And I was like, yeah, that's the way that people view IT. There's this view that, business and that, business and technology change at different rates. And IT are the ones that would be kind of the thing that was slowing everything down. When you think about ERP, when I was at Gartner, there was a question that I would often ask, which was, what's the first word that comes to mind when I say ERP? And I've literally asked thousands of people that question, and I've only ever had one person say something positive. And that person said spinal. It's like the spinal column of your organization. Normally what you get is old-fashioned, painful, those kind of things. And it's because of how we built these old ERP solutions. So what we have seen, and what we've been pushing certainly at SAP is this idea of a clean core. Mm-hmm. A big portion of what every company needs to do is non-differentiating. It's just what you have to do as part of being in business. There's no reason, it doesn't differentiate to your customer. Nobody goes into a sports store and says, I'm going to buy a pair of Adidas instead of Reebok because of how they do accounts payable. That's not what drives you, but you have to do it and you have to do it well. So we're seeing companies starting to say, let's focus on what is really non-differentiating. Let's standardize, let's build that clean core. Let's move it into the cloud. Let's go with a company like SAP, who's done this thousands upon thousands of times for the last 50 years. Let's say, right, and that's going to be standardized. Then for the areas where we truly differentiate, that's where we can start to focus. And it requires a level of governance that many companies have really struggled with. And finally, it's about cloud is the enabler. Cloud is the great leveler. It enables small businesses to compete with massive businesses. But it doesn't change anything about a company by itself. It's what you do with those cloud technologies that makes the difference. So the things that we're really seeing is companies that are trying to address that cost, that speed, and that innovation are saying, let's standardize where it doesn't differentiate. Let's focus on what truly differentiates us to our customers, and let's leverage the power and the scalability of cloud to do something different. And that is really, as an evangelist, that's what I say, most of the time.
That's really profound, Paul. I actually echo what you just said. I chatted up with a global CFO at a public company last night, and his company was just acquired. I brought up the ERP topic to him. I said, what do you think? He said, that's the backbone of our business. That's why I didn't even talk about it, right? Pull the data out of ERP and get into Excel to really do the weekly cash flow forecast every week, because the local controllers have different systems outside of ERP. So because there are many unknowns, they have to factor into their forecast. That's being said, really the digitalization at a global scale can be complex. But has your perspective or changed around the working capital, supply chain, and business systems since the start of the COVID?
I think a lot of things have changed since the start of COVID. As I say, we'd all been talking about disruption and digital disruption for, I don't know, 10, 15 years or something. But if anybody had actually said there will be a time when all your suppliers will be shut down and all your customers will be made to stay home, we would have said, no, that will never, ever, ever happen. And then it happened. And it was something that, there's some good stuff that actually came out of it. What we've worked out is that hybrid working does work. We don't all have to spend 2 hours in traffic each way to get to somewhere to do something. It's also shown many companies that by having a better knowledge and a closer relationship with customers, they actually provide, they create, they deliver better services, better products, and so on. The other thing that I think that we've seen with COVID and with certainly some of the supply chain disruptions that have come around is that, when you think about when ERP was created, the E in the ERP, the enterprise, was the boundaries of your business. It was about, can I get finance, HR, manufacturing and sales all to kind of work together? Now, every company is part of a large business network. And so, what happens in one place? About a year ago, I ordered a new car. Mm-hmm. I had no idea that the parts from that car, which is a German car, were coming from all over the place. Who knew that wiring harnesses were made in the Ukraine? I mean, really, it's, these kind of things that come up. So the business networks have been able to see, if there's a disruption at this part of my supply chain, or there's a disruption over here in my demand from my customers, how do I tie those two things together so that I can change my supplier? I can, ship, from manufacturing from location A to location B. I can move things around. I can make more of product A instead of product B, sort of thing. So a lot of the stuff that at SAP we've been talking about for years now with this intelligent enterprise, with COVID and with supply chain disruptions and now with inflation, has really come to be shown that, yeah, this is what you need to do. So that's really kind of, and it comes back again to that clean, solid core. Your business will always change. And I think that's the thing. It's not about trying to survive this and let's hope things get back to normal. Normal is what we have today, and it will be tomorrow with tomorrow's normal.
Well, I love the concept of business networks, right? I don't know if people know, in US alone, 99% of manufacturers are small mid-sized companies, right? When we say that, it means they have fewer than 500 employees. Among them, 70% the manufacturers have less than 50 employees, right? So that's, total like 12,300 manufacturers are in that. So you have a very vast business networks you can leverage or tap into when you run into supply chain disruptions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of that, among some of the enterprise I worked with, cloud transformation was a challenge. But then, what are the leading organizations doing today to preserve efficiency and margins, considering supply chain disruption and inflation?
Yeah. So I think, when you look at cloud and cloud transformation, for the longest time we assumed, and by we, I'm having the big, we assumed that it was about technology, that it was about doing what I currently do, but putting it into the cloud. And there's also a view that, when it comes to change, you've got business change, you've got technology change, and you've got people change. And there's been a view that people don't like to change. People are fine with change. People don't like being changed. And the problem has been is that business change and technology change and people change happen at different rates, and they don't always stay in sync. So with cloud, it's another piece that comes into it. And the view has got to be, and where we've seen companies be really successful, is not just to say, well, this is how I've done things for the last 20 years. So I'll do the same thing, but now I'll do it in the cloud. But to say, what does a day in the life of a customer, a supplier, a partner look like 3 years, 5 years, maybe even 10 years from now? What will we need to be able to do to differentiate ourselves in that market? And so therefore, what do we need to do now to be able to get ourselves in that direction? Cloud then becomes the vehicle on that journey. It's not the destination. It's never been about, well, we have to move to cloud. No, it's about we have to be able to be the best company we can be. We have to be the best for our customers. And so the companies that we see that are doing that are really starting to think, as you have to quote Steve Jobs at some point in every webcast, I think, you start with the customer experience and work your way back to technology. You never start with, hey, I've got some cloud technology. What should I do with it?
I love that, because at the end of the day, the value you create for your customer wins, right? Now, if you're just focusing on customer experience, the value you bring to them, the business will flow, right? I'm a firm believer in that growth thrives at the intersection of technology and humanity. So that's what really that means at the end of the day. Well, here it comes to my last question, right? That stay with driving operation excellence. What is your prediction for the technology trends in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, well, my former company, Gartner, does a wonderful technology trends publication every year. When I look at the technology trends, I always see that the future of business and the future of work drive the technology, and the technology then also drives the future of work and the future of business. So it is this symbiotic relationship between the two. Sometimes I think those things get out of sync, and we get all really excited about some sort of technology thing, whether that's metaverse or blockchain or whatever it might be. And, both, of course, in the press today as much as inflation almost. But then there's other times when you say, okay, well, what does that future of work look like? And when I think about ERP and what ERP was created for, it was standardization, reduction of variability, operational efficiency, those kind of things. When you look at where the world is going, hyper automation, you've got things like cobots, which I love that term, cobots, coming in. You've got, from a human perspective, people won't be at a job for 10, 20, 25 years and then retire and get a clock and go off into the sunset somewhere. People will be working, portfolio careers with, maybe at a job for 18 months. So all of these things come together, but at the core of it, and this came out, I think, a little bit in our webcast, you still have to do the basics of being in business. You still have to buy some materials, you have to make a product, you have to ship it to a customer, you hopefully make a profit at the end of the day, you hire some people, you do all of these things. Of course, you have to pay taxes. All of these things come together. So to me, when you look at kind of where that technology is going, it's about making business is complicated. You know that better than I do. It's hard to do. At SAP, our job is to take away a lot of that complexity and to help customers become as agile and flexible as they possibly can. And I think technology will go along to drive that. There'll always be these little spurs of kind of cool, shiny things. But at the end of the day, technology and the future of work are completely interrelated.
That's absolutely profound, right? Thank you for what you do, and thank you for what SAP does, as a matter of fact. And so thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today, Paul. And here's what I really learned from our conversation, right? In the past decade, it has been very easy ride for financial leaders, and company grew, the market reacted positively, interest rates were low. Now the perfect storm has landed, right? This is not transitory. This is time to adapt, adjust, and accelerate the automation, like what I said during our webcast. We need to focus on the fundamentals, right? From a strategic use of working capital to outsmarting inflation and drive operation excellence from every corner of the company. So you will come out of the storm a stronger leader and a more prepared leader for future adversity. You talked about agility earlier, and inflation gave us an opportunity to take our companies to a new place, right? Those are the fundamentals we got to really take a deeper look. If you want to get deeper dive into the outsmarting inflation, check out our webcast again. The title of that is Outsmarting Inflation, Best Practice Working Capital Strategies, hosted by SAP. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Stay hungry, stay bold, and stay grateful.